Good morning. Welcome, committee members and guests. My name is Shanine Coates, and I'm the Director of the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division. Thank you for being with us today on such an important day in our nation. We will have a shorter meeting today. This is meeting 6 of the Mathematics Curriculum Framework and Evaluation Criteria Committee. It's been a year like no other, and our work has gone on unexpectedly at the start into the fall, but here we are starting our 6th meeting with only 2 more to go. Thank you again for sticking with this important project and for all the work you do each and every meeting and in preparation for each of our meetings. In my comments this morning, I would simply like to say that as you prepare to discuss and make recommendations on the 4 chapters that are coming before you, all of which are second reads, keep in mind that second reads are intended to give you the opportunity to recommend substantive edits and changes. If you identify significant issues within the guidance or the content, use today and tomorrow to discuss deeper and more substantial edits. You'll discuss them, you'll come to consensus first in your small groups and then in whole groups. It is important that we make these types of recommendations now, because as we look ahead to the final chapter reviews in December, we will be asking you to provide feedback in a more holistic manner and ask you to examine all of the chapters for cohesiveness, continuity, and coherence as a whole, and of course, fulfillment with the requirements of the State Board of Education guidelines for the revision of the mathematics framework, and to make your final fine-tuning recommendations. So at this time, I would like to thank and acknowledge our State Board of Education liaison, board member Patricia Rucker, and staff Pam Castleman. Also like to thank Instructional Quality Commission members Lindsay Gatanda and Shay Fairchild, who will be observing the work of the committee today and tomorrow. And Denise, will you please conduct roll call for us?
I'm here if you called my name.
Ina Bradshaw.
Here.
Aaron Frazier.
Here.
Lori Firemuth.
Here.
Lori Fury.
Here.
Lindsay Gatfield.
Here.
Crystal Gomez.
Here.
Janet Hollister.
Here.
Lisa Hogerman.
Here.
Stephanie Holloway.
Here.
Andrew Huffaker.
Here.
Janie Kim.
Here.
Rebecca Pariso.
Here.
Christina Rubalcava.
Here.
Bernadette Salgarino.
Here.
Cole Sampson.
Here.
Rosa Saratore.
Here.
Diane Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn the meeting over to Constantino Silva, Education Administrator for the Curriculum Frameworks Unit, who will take us through the meeting norms and today's agenda.
Thank you, Director Coates, and good morning, committee members. It is indeed a pleasure to see everybody again. By now, everyone is familiar with these important Zoom buttons. Nevertheless, we do this review for the public's sake as well. The all-important mute button. I hope everybody is able to see. There it is. Okay. The all-important mute button to the left, to the very left of the options. Click this button to mute and unmute yourself throughout the meeting. Please ensure that your microphone is off when you're not speaking to reduce background noise. Next to the microphone, you will find the caret or circumflex. This is for in the event that you are having any audio connection issues. This will give you other connection options. And the reactions, the button found by clicking on the symbol that looks like two people. This is where you will find the primary Zoom reactions that we will be using throughout the meeting. We'll discuss those shortly, but just a brief comment on the raise hand feature. This is where you will raise your hand if you want to speak, and you will be called on when you wish to do so. So just like in our previous meetings, we have turned off the chat feature due to the Bagley-Keene restrictions regarding the public's access to all of the CFCC's discussions. In the instance that we do use the chat to provide any materials or links, we will be sure that those materials or links are available to the public as well. On today's agenda, we will begin by discussing the norms and procedures for our virtual meeting, which by now, of course, you're all familiar with. But we will, again, nonetheless, review those for the public's sake as well so that they know how the committee operates. We will hear briefly from our lead writer, Dr. Brian Lindeman, about the writing team's approach to the revision of the 4 chapters you have before you today and tomorrow. We will then move into the breakout rooms for the discussion based on a second read of Chapter 4, Exploring, Discovering, and Reasoning with and About Mathematics. After that, we'll take a break and return for public comment. After public comment, we'll convene for whole group consensus discussion on Chapter 4. This will lead us to lunch. After the break, we will have a short presentation on Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, and the way the guidelines and principles of UDL inform the work of the Math CFCC. After the presentation, we will move into the breakout groups for the second read of Chapter 6, Math for Understanding, Transitional Kindergarten through Grade 5. This will bring us to the end of the day. As you know, we have a shortened day today. We will we'll wrap up our day by doing an overview of tomorrow's work, and we will adjourn for the day. The meeting materials for this meeting you have received via the box link, the meeting agenda, the 4 draft chapters that you are reviewing, chapters 4, 6, 7, and 8, the State Board of Education revised schedule of significant events or timeline, the guidelines for the revision of the math framework, including the guidelines tracking tool for your individual use, and the written public comments received, a total of 7 submissions, some of which were submitted during or immediately following the previous meeting. So you will notice some of the comments included there pertain to chapters that you reviewed the last time. Just a note for anyone who does not already have the draft chapters and would like access to them, you may write the address on the screen to receive the box link, the Math Framework mailbox. A very brief note about public comment, which is scheduled at 10:35 this morning and tomorrow at 3:30 in the afternoon. Members of the public, you can view the whole group discussions via the CDE webcast, and you will also have access to all of the breakout rooms via the Zoom links. However, public comment will take place via the telephone line listed on the screen. We will project the slide again at public comment time. Additionally, if you wish to submit written comments, please use the Math Framework mailbox. Again, the address is on the screen. Comments received during the meeting will be provided to the Math CFCC members and made available to the public at the next meeting of the Math CFCC, but will not be read aloud. A quick review of our usual norms. Please be present and focus during the meeting. If your camera is not on, we will assume that you are away. Please monitor your airtime. Remember the rule of thumb, 3 before me. If you recall, what this means is that if you've already spoken once, please allow at least 3 people the opportunity to speak before requesting to speak again. Again, when you're not speaking, please leave your microphone muted. When voting, please do not remove your votes. Our staff will clear all the votes after they have been counted. More on the voting a bit later. And please pay attention to your background lighting. Just the usual reminder again, bright lights or open windows behind you will cause you to appear darkened and less visible on the camera. So if you have any bright light behind you, we recommend that you increase the lighting in front of you so that you do not appear as a silhouette. Okay, and with that, it is time now to welcome our lead writer for the Math Framework, Dr. Brian Lindeman. He will say a few words on the writing team's approach to the 4 chapters that you are reviewing today and tomorrow, chapters 4, 6, 7, and 8. which, as we have said already, these are second reads. Welcome, Dr. Lindeman.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. Good morning, CFCC members, CDE, board members, and the public. On behalf of the writers, I'm excited to share these 4 chapters, and we've all worked very hard on them to address the revisions. I'm just going to briefly outline a few of those revisions. Chapter 4 will be the first chapter you will be reviewing today. And that there were several comments that called for more number talks, strings, etc. Those were addressed. Definition of reasoning, look-fors for administrators. So there were lots of revisions that were asked for and made in that chapter. Chapter 6 is on TK5, and there were calls for more sort of charts, graphs, bulleting to break up things, and that was implemented. Refining the structure of vignettes, I will say, is ongoing, and we are hoping we can work with the CFCC to better get a more coherent structure for all of the vignettes in the entire framework rather than address them, chapter by chapter. And I think that will happen naturally as we start to look at the entire framework in the next few meetings. Certainly more vignettes with UDL mentions particularly was addressed as well. Chapter 7, which is the 6-8 chapter, had some calls for use of calculators in particular, some planning advice for the CLIs, the categories of investigation, NCTM, catalyzing change, including a reference to that, moving 7th and 8th grade, can't read my own writing, more 7th and 8th grade tasks, and that was certainly put in there, quite a few of those. And again, the vignettes, some revision not only for UDL, but also in their specific calls, for addressing ELD in the vignettes. And then chapter 8, 9, 12, there were calls for snapshots, some more tasks, things like that. Placing course descriptions, though we're going to now put those into the appendix. And then there you'll see a new, I think, an improved graphic for the pathways as opposed to the one that was in there. A vignette with environmental principles has been now included. That was included prior, but it is now in there for sure. And then the big change that's not reflected in the document, which we want to propose, is to retitle Mathematics for Understanding to Mathematics, Investigating and Connecting. That's Mathematics, Investigating and Connecting. And then that would also be a title change to the other 2 chapters for TK5 and 6-8. And some of the reasoning behind that was that we felt like that gets at the twin processes of mathematics that are kind of critical to understanding math, investigating and connecting, as well as gets away from the notion that mathematics for understanding could only be achieved by a certain pathway, which is not something we want to promote at all. So we hope you will consider that in your discussions today in the future draft of 912. Thank you. That will be it for the comments.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lindeman. Okay, and we are now ready to begin our transition to the small groups. We have first, Chapter 4, Exploring, Discovering, and Reasoning with and About Mathematics. Again, chapter second reads are your opportunity to delve deeper into how the State Board of Education approved guidelines are addressed and to recommend substantive changes. We asked you to take a detailed and thorough look at the guidelines in order to formulate your comments and recommendations, and we hope you did so. Do keep in mind, however, that an important question you should ask yourselves as you consider your recommendations is, how can I help make this document relevant and applicable to the entire state, not only to my district or my school? We will now begin our transition, as I said, into the small groups. The Google Docs for this chapter have been added to the bit.ly link that appears on the screen. and committee members, you received that link yesterday. The group consensus document now includes all of your separate recommendations. You're going to be seeing the whole of this document for the first time this morning. Our groups are unchanged. We have our alpha, our beta, and our groups. Alpha with breakout 1, beta breakout 2, and delta breakout 3. Members of the public, to observe the deliberations of the committee, you may choose a group and sign into the Zoom meeting using the information that will appear on the next slide. You will be admitted to a waiting room and then promptly into the meeting room. All of the rooms will be deliberating on the same chapter at the same time. If you choose to exit a meeting to attend a different one, you will be admitted to the waiting room of the new meeting and then admitted to the meeting in progress. A kind reminder for our members of the public to please not interfere in any way with the work of the committee. We welcome you in the small group meetings, but know that we reserve the right to protect the work of the committee and block anyone displaying inappropriate or disrespectful behavior. Members of the public attend as observers and may not use any of the participation keys or speak during the breakout meetings. Again, here are our Zoom reactions. In the small groups, we will be using the yes, no, and raise hand features. Okay, and here we are. We are now ready to transition. We have until 10:25 for the first small breakout room. We will leave the slide on in the main meeting, and we will see you in the small groups. Thank you.
Constantino?
Yes.
I was just looking at the drafts or the comments that are on chapter 4 and chapter 6, and mine aren't on either one, but I did do it on Sunday. Is there any way to at least get my chapter 6 added in since that's later on today?
Yeah, thank you for letting us know. We will review that and make sure that we include your comments. Thank you for catching that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It is now time for public comment. Members of the public, you are encouraged to make your comments by calling in to the number on the screen and by pressing *6 to be added to the queue. Once you're connected, we will acknowledge you as our commenter in the order that you have dialed in. You will have 2 minutes to provide your comment, at which time we will announce time and move on to the next person. As always, please follow the rules of decorum and respect. You may also submit your comments in writing to the Math Framework mailbox that appears on the screen. Written comments will be provided to the Math CFCC members and made available to the public, but will not be read aloud. Before we start, we need to mention that there is a slight delay in the live stream. Therefore, we will allow a few seconds for that. In the meantime, we will take roll.
Heidi Spiegler,
Here.
Lena Bradshaw, Lena Bradshaw, Aaron Fraser,
Here.
Lori Firemuth,
Here.
Lori Fury, Lindsay Gatfield,
Here.
Crystal Gomez,
Here.
Janet Hollister,
Here.
Lisa Hogerman,
Here.
Stephanie Holloway,
Here.
Andrew Huffaker,
Here.
Janie Kim,
Here.
Rebecca Pariso,
Here.
Christina Rubalcava,
Here.
Bernadette Salgarino,
Here.
Cole Sampson,
Here.
Rosa Serratore,
Here.
Diane Wilson,
Here.
Lena Bradshaw.
Here.
Thank you. First caller, you may begin.
Q&A session has started.
First caller, you may begin.
Thank you, committee members, writers, and CDE staff members. My name is Rachel Ruffalo, and I am with the Education Trust West. Trust West is one of the co-signers on the public comment letter that was submitted to the committee titled November 3-4 Math CFCC Letter. I would like to express my appreciation to the committee members for reviewing our comments, which are quite comprehensive and across 4 chapters under review for this meeting. We recognize that at this point in the process, specific recommendations and suggested revisions to the text may be the most helpful, and our letter, which includes the review and input of 11 educational organizations, is designed to provide this level of specific input. I would also like to express a comment on the concept of cultural relevance that is applicable to every chapter of the framework. Rather than consider culturally relevant examples as something that needs to be added to the framework, we urge the committee members and writers to consider how the framework can embody the actionable guidance on culturally and linguistically relevant pedagogy that supports the instructional needs of each student throughout each section and chapter of the framework. A key element of culturally, linguistically relevant pedagogy must be starting with the assets that our diverse students bring to their learning. And to quote the 2020 position paper from Todos Mathematics for All, if we truly believe that we're moving towards asset-based views of students, we must expand our understanding of what it means to be good at mathematics, make space for alternative ways of knowing and doing mathematics based in the community, and acknowledge the brilliance, both in mathematics and beyond, of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our classrooms. We must be explicitly anti-racist. And while examples of instruction are essential, we urge the committee members and writers to continue to consider how they can reflect this manifestation of culturally, linguistically relevant pedagogy throughout the entire framework. Thank you again for your consideration of my comments.
Caller, you may begin.
Hi, committee members. This is Manuel Buenrostro, Policy Associate at Californians Together. And I as well want to thank the committee for your continued work on improving the math framework and ensuring that it reflects the diversity and needs of California's diverse students. I also want to thank members for elevating several of the comments that were submitted in our coalition letter that Rachel previously mentioned, which we drafted alongside the support of several other organizations. On Chapter 4, we definitely appreciate the connection that this chapter has to solving real-life issues, and we think that this provides a great opportunity to build on student experiences and assets. Areas of improvement that we still see for the chapter include building on language access, which includes ensuring that the chapter includes suggestions for how to build language along with content, and continue to provide additional scaffolds for lessons that can support English learners. We also see a need to include additional differentiation to support students and strategies for students that might be at different levels of math proficiency. So this includes strategies for how to support students that might not be currently on grade level, helping students build on their background knowledge, and make sure that there's important content and communication strategies that can support access. And as we look forward to Chapter 6, 7th, and 8th, which are focused on the different grade levels, We hope that you continue to look at our comments for each of those chapters and look for additional opportunities to continue to incorporate language supports throughout the different examples and vignettes, and continue to add examples that might elevate cultural relevance for students and include more asset-based language. We look forward to our continued engagement with this process and look forward to following up with additional examples. Thank you again.
Caller, you may begin. Next caller, you may. That concludes public comment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to our members of the public for your both your written and your oral comments. Okay, we are ready now to transition to the whole group discussion on Chapter 4, which the small groups have just discussed. We will now project the Google Doc that has all of the consolidated comments. And we will turn it over to our co-chairs.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your hard work so far this morning. So as you can see at the top, we had no red highlighted comments to revisit. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our, 12 yellow highlighted comments and 30 comments that were added in Tier 4. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with our first comment under Global number 1. Okay. Would anyone like to speak to comment number 1? Okay, Janet.
So I can just speak to it because it's my comment. As I read through all of the chapters, I see a lot of examples around data science and number. And it just began to start dawning on me that if we're really going to talk about a common pathway for students through Math 2, it would be really helpful to get some content and tying to math practices around some of the things that are going to be really key in the sort of Math 1, Math 2, algebra, geometry space. And so if we could just add some additional things that are going to help people understand what it looks like, both in terms of math practices and content.
Okay. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Okay. Seeing no hands, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Now remember, a yes vote moves it to the authors. A no vote makes it red and it will not move forward. So just remember that again. A yes vote moves it forward to the authors, and a no vote just makes it red and it will not move forward to the authors. Okay, so let's see no hands. Let's go ahead and vote.
We have 16 yes and 2 I can live with it.
We have consensus.
So that takes us to comment number 2. Would anyone like to speak to comment number 2? Okay, Erin?
So we had talked about this in our group, and we originally were going to highlight it, but now I'm trying to find it again. Hold on. But it was, and this example comes up in 2 different chapters. Just the way it's written, both times that I've read this, when it says that it's compare and connect activity, students compare and contrast 2 representations or 2 methods, but in parentheses, where it says, e.g., counting up by 5s, going up to 30, and then coming back down more, etc. That parentheses part is the part that I keep going, wait, what is this talking about here? So, and I was wondering if it was because I don't have the background in elementary, But it seems confusing when it's talking about comparing and contrasting two methods. What methods are they referring to in there? So that was my question on that, and it comes up in 2 chapters.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to that? Okay, Rebecca?
I was just thinking, aren't the compare and connect, aren't they giving those are examples in the parentheses? Is that not? Am I reading it wrong?
So it was, and I understand that it's examples, but I don't understand. So the methods, counting up by 5s, going up to 30, and then coming back down more what? And again, it could be because I don't have a background in elementary, but I'm not sure what's being referred to in those parentheses. Those methods to me, just it's confusing how it's worded.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay, did you still want to speak?
I just initially had the same thought as Rebecca, and I had originally highlighted it in our small group with Aaron too, and then realized. And so for anyone, it's just not clear that one piece of it that's counting up to 30 and then counting back more. And so just to make that one part more clear, whether it's just any strategy, because if they're just naming different strategies that kids could compare, then that's great. So any strategy would work there. That one's just a very vague strategy that's explained.
Okay, thank you. Christina?
So I actually did the same thing. I was like, oh, those are examples, but maybe instead of just please clarify, maybe we can be a little more specific with please clarify the methods being referred to in the parenthetical, just so it's more clear to the writers exactly what we need for them to clarify.
Okay, Erin, are you open to that addition to your comment?
Yeah, and again, that's why I was kind of deferring. I had put it on there hoping that maybe somebody in elementary could explain it to me. So yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more discussion? All right, so if we can go ahead and take a vote, if we'd like this move forward to the writers is a yes, to not move it forward is a no.
We have 16 yes and 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, so now we're on comment number 3. I would just like to say, I believe comment number 19 addresses this as, my comment would be, I think number 19 addresses this as well and actually says where to put it, but that's my comment. Erin, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'll withdraw it.
Okay.
For the same reasons you just mentioned.
Okay. So if there's no objections to it being withdrawn. All right, perfect. So we move on to number 5. Okay, Janet?
I'll just speak to it. I think that any time that we can tie our math framework to things that are happening in our college system, it's awesome. And when I was reading over this statement, there's just a lot of language that seems to match with what's happening in the framework. And so I just thought it would sort of bolster, if we can somehow connect with our college systems, it would bolster some people's thinking about, oh yeah, this isn't just the framework, it also connects to our college system. So I probably didn't add writer's discretion in there, but just I just wanted to highlight that document as a source of some inspiration.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on number 5? All right. So we can hold a vote.
We have 17 yes and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay. That takes us to number 6. Any comments on number 6? Okay, Crystal?
So this one refers to the snapshot in the high school section, and I know Janet wrote this and found that it was a 7th grade task. And so my question would be, was this meant to be a 7th grade task? If so, then I guess we could move it. Or was it supposed to be in high school to address unfinished learning or to scaffold learning into entry level into the content for high school? And I guess that would be a question for why the writers put this here.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other comment? Diane?
So I hadn't actually thought of what Crystal just said, but I think rather than moving it to grade 6-8, I would rather that an appropriate high school snapshot be put in here so that we aren't losing a snapshot in the high school chapter.
Okay, so you're suggesting that. Sorry, my brain is not working very well this morning.
So I think we could, if Janet was okay with amending comment 6 to either clarify why there is a grade 7 snapshot in high school or create a high school snapshot.
Janet, would you be open to that?
I think that putting 3 of either explain why it's there, move it, and if you move it, it's a good example. It's a good reasoning example. So we're giving maybe 3 options. Make sure that they replace it. So I guess that's what it is. So either explain why it's there, or move it and replace it with something else.
Okay, Erin,
so that you don't lose. Yeah.
That was just what I was going to say. Is there's really 2 options there.
Mm-hmm. Or remove and replace it. Okay, how is that?
Should it include with a high school appropriate?
Okay, that might be good. And then do we want to take the words right at the beginning of the comment where it says move and just take out that word move so it's not contradicting what's at the bottom? There we go. So if everybody could take a minute to look at that, Rebecca?
I was just going to say that I think I would like to see it made clear that we do want to see this somewhere else if it's going to be moved, because the way that it's written right now, it says remove and replace. So I just wanted to clarify, I really like that example. I think it's important, and I would like it to stay. We can add something else in, but I'd also like that one.
Okay. And part B would be to keep the snapshot, just move to appropriate place. Okay. Dr. Ford or Ben, did you want to speak? I saw your hand up.
No, that's what I was going to ask.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any more comments or modifications to number 6? Okay, Cole?
I think I heard that there was also a suggestion of keeping it and moving to the appropriate place, but also adding a high school example is what I heard the first time, but I'm not reading that in A and B options.
Okay. So please explain what the snapshot here, or remove it and replace it with the high school appropriate snapshot. B, keep the snapshot but move it to a more appropriate place.
I think if you move up at the top, replace with a high school appropriate snapshot should be part of B.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. Okay, Lindsay?
I am putting my hand down.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for helping us get that correct so that the writers have clear direction. All right. Any other comments? All right. Can we go ahead and vote?
We have 17 yes and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus?
All right. All the way down to 15.
Can I strike this one? I'll remove it.
Okay. And as long as there's no objection, we'll go ahead and strike through number 15. Okay, so that takes us to 18. Any conversation? Aaron, did you want to speak to 18? Oh, no. Anybody want to speak to 18? Okay, Janet, and then Aaron.
17 and 18 are exactly the same. So we highlighted it to just remove it because it's the same as 17. It's not unclear why it's there.
Okay. So you're asked. So we'll just, should I ask, are you willing to withdraw comment number 18, Janet?
Sure. I'm not willing to withdraw 17, but I'll withdraw 18.
Okay. All right. There we go. So that takes us to number 19. Or number 19. Do we need, is there any discussion on 19? Okay, Diane?
The only reason we highlighted this one in our group is because there were so many that were addressing this section. So my suggestion is simply to move the graph to the place where the graph is discussed.
Okay. And I think we already took care of one of the other comments on this before. All right. So I don't see any hands, if we could go ahead and vote then on this one.
We have 16 yes and 2 I can live with it.
Okay. So that would be consensus. So number 20. Rebecca?
I'm always up for adding more UDL strategies and EL support. But what I was hoping to see for comment 20 and 21 is maybe we could be more precise. Like maybe we can locate exactly where and what we want them to add in or what strategies to use.
Okay, thank you. Crystal?
So for number 20, we could probably just put C tier 4, because I know we took a bunch of public comment options for specifics. And so I didn't have any specific, and then I saw that, so that was better. For the UDL, I'm not sure how to even add that in, so that's why I wasn't more specific.
Okay, so Crystal, let me ask you this. So would you be willing to withdraw comment 20 in lieu of the comments that are in tier 4?
Yes.
Okay, so is there any objection to removing 20 with the idea that there's more specific direction in tier 4? Okay, so we'll withdraw comment 20. Okay, so that takes us to 21. Any further comment on, we kind of just grouped these together. Is there any further comment on 21? Okay, seeing no comment, we'll go ahead and vote on 21.
We have 14 yes, 1 no, and 3 I can live with it.
Consensus?
Okay, moving on to 22. Any comment on 22?
If there's no comment, does that mean I address it since it's my initials?
If you would like to address it, that's great, Rosa. If you don't care to, we can vote on it as it stands on its own.
Well, there's a quick look. It's as an example of and versus but, not as and. As an example. it's one of those on any given day when you're reading these things. When I read this particular line, for some reason, I thought of my past superintendent, I'll give her a shout out. She is now the superintendent of Palm Springs Unified. And it's an example of a power of words. She was big on, instead of saying but, say and it really changes the tenor sometimes of what you're saying, and it sometimes can be more inviting. I'm not necessarily, as I reread this one now on 179, I see why you think that from what you tried. And you say, and I don't think that always works, because instead of but, I don't think, sometimes the but can be a little shutting somebody down. My consideration was, see, anytime we're using the word but in here, especially when it's a vignette with a dialogue, sometimes switching out, even in your own personal lives out there, my friends, sometimes the word and is a little more inviting and positive than yeah, but.
So can I suggest an edit then to this, about what you said, with what you just said, that please seek out this this condition, especially during the, vignettes with dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to focus on that.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that addition, Rosa?
Yeah, that's basically why it drew my attention to that one. I'm not going to be looking at every and but throughout the document, but in that vignette, I thought, maybe and would be better.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right, voting.
We have 10 yes and 8 I can live with.
Consensus.
Okay, we're on to number 23. Any discussion on number 23? Okay, Christina?
Just letting the group know that we actually discussed this and clarified the language. It's now down in comment 41.
Okay, so Eris, this is, I believe, your comment. Could you maybe read comment 41 and see if it clarifies what you're trying to get across?
Well, I'm the person who actually suggested making it yellow, so that was my group who made the clarification.
Okay. Okay, so would you be okay with us then withdrawing your comment in lieu of comment 41?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, so tier 4s all need to be voted. I believe all tier 4s are yellow. Imagine they're all yellow. We need to vote. So a yes vote, again, is still going to move them forward, and a no vote is going to turn them red. So we're voting each of these comments in tier 4. Either yes is to move it forward, a no vote turns it red. So we're starting with additional comments from the Alpha group on number 25.
Hi, Lori. Constantino here.
Yes.
Yes, just to reiterate that is correct. And as well to add that Stephanie and I believe Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, submitted some a couple of links or a couple of resources for the committee members, and those are in the box link under the folder that says committee submissions. So when we get to the individual items, each one of the members will refer to their submissions, but I just wanted to make a mention of that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're looking at comment number 25. Any comments on number 25? Anyone wanting to speak on number 25? Okay, go ahead and vote.
We have 14 yes and 4 I can live with it.
Okay, so we're on to 26. Anyone want to speak to number 26? Okay, voting.
We have 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, moving on to number 27. I'm sorry, I know that Delta Group also discussed this one. So I would invite everyone also to possibly look at comment, if we could also look at comment number 53 at the same time. Am I right about that?
Okay, so
16. Sorry, I just remembered it. I wanted to maybe bring it together. 216 to 226 and 53. 216 to 220. Yes. So if everyone could take a moment to read comment number 27. This was taken, I can just speak for, and Delta Group, correct me if I'm wrong, Cole, because I know you added this to there, and Bernadette, you brought it up. So if you could read 27, and then maybe if we could scroll down to 53. And then Erin, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say that I'm one of Alpha, and we were going with a lot of the comments from this particular public comment, but I don't know that we would mind withdrawing because 53 actually builds on that, and I like the building with the cultural histories in there. So I wouldn't mind withdrawing. I don't know if anybody else in my group would object to it.
Okay, does anybody from Alpha object to the withdrawing of comment 27 and with the placement of 53 being there? Okay, so we'll go ahead and withdraw 27. All right, so then we're on 28. Okay, all right, any speakers? Okay, so let's vote.
We have 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, so we're on to 29. So if everybody could read 29. Okay, any speakers on 29? Okay, if we could go ahead and vote.
We have 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, number 30. Okay, any speak? I'm sorry, just so you know, I'm pausing because I'm not sure if everybody has read these comments. So I'm just trying to wait a second to give everyone a chance to read before I'm asking for speakers. But during the pause, if you'd like to speak, please don't hesitate to go ahead and put your hand up. So number 30, any speakers? Okay, voting.
We're waiting on a couple more votes. One more vote from Stephanie. 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, number 31. Okay. Any speakers? Okay, voting.
We have 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay. Okay, number 32. Any speakers? Okay, voting.
We have 17 yes. Oh, 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, number 33. Speakers and voting.
We have 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, number 34. Okay, speakers. Okay, voting.
We have 17 yes and one I can live with it.
Consensus.
Number 35. Okay, speakers. Voting.
We have 15 yes and 3 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, number 36. Okay, speakers. Okay, voting.
We have 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, number 37. Speakers. Voting.
We have 13 yes and 5 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, number 38. Thank you. speakers? And voting?
We have 13 yes and 5 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, number 39. Okay, Janet?
So I just want to explain that this was one of the public comments from Californians Together, and I don't remember which one it was, but we tried to modify it so that English learners were not sort of always relegated to the concrete, and actually had a conversation with one of the writers. And so I just wanted to highlight that it is related to one of the comments, and we wanted to modify it a bit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Constantino here. It is bullet number, or the 8th bullet for chapter 12. For chapter 4, page 12, line 314.
Right. Okay, any other speakers? And then voting?
We're waiting on one more vote. Lena? 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, thank you very much, Alpha Group, for your hard work. And we're moving on to Beta Group. Okay, any speakers to number 40? Okay, Christina?
So this came up when we were having the discussion about the placement of the graph that was referred to in comment 19. I interpreted it differently, thinking this graph went with section 736 to 745. So our suggestion was, since it didn't, perhaps putting an example of a graph that students might analyze and build a function from would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you. All right, any other speakers for comment 40? Aaron?
Could it maybe, because there's two examples of that. It's back, with the graph from comment 19, but also there's another example a couple pages earlier, page 29, of a build this function that's talked about as the build this function activities. So maybe just a reference to those rather than putting a third example of the same thing.
Okay, so how would we like to modify that comment to say what you said?
I would just, instead of provide an example, refer to examples given in previous pages or something. I don't think you need to put a third example of it.
Okay, so Christina, is your group okay with that?
For me, yeah, I would be okay with that. Maybe we could say for lines 736 to 743, refer back to the examples mentioned previously. Something like that.
Okay. Okay. Any other speakers to this comment? Okay, seeing none. Voting.
We have 13 yes and 5 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, and we're to number 41. Okay, any speakers to this? Okay, seeing none, vote.
We have 16 yes and 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, that takes us to number 42. Any speakers on number 42?
So this is Bernadette. We were thinking that the modeling cycle as being used in this sentence need to be explained. We could also reference it to the term modeling cycle that it's being mentioned in chapter 8. And we also noticed that modeling cycle is not in the glossary at the moment, and adding that into the glossary is also going to be very, very helpful for our audience.
Any other speakers? Okay, voting.
We have 17 yes and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, number 43.
This is Bernadette again. If you look at how they have described authentic mathematical context, I thought that it's also necessary to include that this is purposeful, that is, in other words, expanding it to just mention, besides mentioning that this is a problem where students investigate or struggle and so on and so forth. So I also added, this is, we hope that this could also be added in the glossary. I also included a reference here where a framework for authentic mathematics problem is being defined by, based off of the work of the several authors.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers or questions? All right, voting.
We're waiting on one more vote. 9 yes and 9 I can live with it.
We have consensus.
Okay, moving on to number 44.
And again, this is Bernadette. Based from that sentence, it would be helpful to mention that looking into those mathematical context problems, that there's a purpose and it's relevant as kids are doing those tasks.
Okay. Seeing no hands, go ahead and vote.
We have 13 yes and 5 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, number 45.
I was thinking that it would be nice to also highlight one of science instructional strategies that they use, the claim evidence reasoning, as an opportunity to, again, talk about how students are also showing evidence and showcasing their reasoning, and NSDA and NGSS has this strategy highlighted in the framework as well. So it would be nice to have that as part of our math framework to mention.
Okay. Seeing no hands, if we could go ahead and vote.
$17 yes and 1 I can live with.
Consensus.
Okay, number 46.
So this is the graphic that is in the Math CFCC member submissions in the box folder. I'll bring it up on my screen here. Give me just a second. I should be fine. I need to do private computer. Okay. Are you able to see that okay?
Perhaps if you can make it just a smidgen bigger. Okay. So does anyone need more time to make consideration? Okay. So if we could maybe just go ahead and go back to the, let me assess this. Can I just get a thumbs up if everybody is okay with what they're seeing and is ready to move back to the comments? Okay. I think we're ready to go. Thank you. So, all right. So comment number 46. If we could go ahead and take a vote on 46.
We have 17 yes, and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay. So for 47, unless there's an objection from my group, I'm going to withdraw it as we've already cleared this comment. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to do a match, but
it's 29.
29, thank you. All right. So we'll go ahead and withdraw 47. Okay. Number 48.
And I'll bring this up as well out of my inbox.
Cole, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I just thought it was a really good time as we were having discussion to kind of make the connections between the student habits of mind and the effective teaching practices we call out later in the framework, but bringing it kind of all together. And so what this does is it'll tell you if you're looking to build one, here are the 2 effective practices from from principles to action you should be focusing on to do that. And so this is a really good guide for administrators, coaches, teachers, and that.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Okay. All right, I'm just pausing. All right, we'll go ahead and go back to the comment unless I see a hand go up. All right, so 48 will be a vote. I'm sorry.
We have 17 yes, and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Right, 49 is also a repeat.
Number 31.
Thank you. So I would risk if there's no objections from my group, we'll go ahead and withdraw. Okay, so we're going to withdraw 49.
Okay.
Same thing with 50. It is a repeat.
Number 28.
Thank you. I got the repeaters. I just didn't match them. I couldn't write them down fast enough to match them up. Okay, so withdraw 50. 51 is also a repeat.
51 is from 35.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and withdraw 51. 52 is also a repeat. Alpha and beta, we're working just in sync there. Okay, so let's withdraw 52. Okay, 53, we do need to vote on. This was the, with Alpha withdrew their comment that was similar to 53 because we had added some language for ours. Does anyone need to speak again about this particular comment? Okay, so we'll go ahead and vote on 53.
We have 18 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, and 54 is also a repeat. So I respectfully withdraw 54. Is that okay, Lena? Sorry, that was yours.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So I believe that's all our comments. Go team. We can tell that we're really on the same page a lot with some of the comments that were made. And so that's always nice to know that we're thinking the same direction.
We are in agreement. Great job. I think we only have one item to take care of, and that would be that the writers recommended that chapters, actually, I guess this would come up in 6, 7, and 8, but just keep in mind, we won't discuss it now for 4, but as you go to lunch and think of 6 for this afternoon, the name change proposed by the writers. Okay, so we'll leave that for the whole group discussion when we get to that. It is now 11:35 approximately. We will take a 40-minute lunch. We will return then at 12:15 for the UDL presentation that we have. And then following that, we'll begin our final discussion of the afternoon. Thank you and have a good lunch.
Thank you.
Welcome back from lunch, everyone. Denise, will you please take roll?
Heidi Spiegler.
I'm here.
Lena Bradshaw.
Here.
Aaron Fraser.
Here.
Lori Firemuth.
Here.
Lori Fury. Lori Fury. Lindsay Gatfield.
Here.
Crystal Gomez.
Here.
Janet Hollister.
Here.
Lisa Hogerman. Stephanie Holloway. Janie Kim.
Here.
Rebecca Pariso.
Here.
Christina Rubalcava.
Here.
Bernadette Salgarino.
Here.
Cole Sampson.
Here.
Rosa Sarratore.
Here.
Diane Wilson.
Here.
Lisa Hogerman.
Here.
Stephanie Holloway.
Here.
Thank you. Great, thank you. So next we have a presentation on Universal Design for Learning, also known as UDL. The guidelines for the revision of the math framework call for guidance that addresses the universal, emphasis on universal, meaning for all students, first instruction needs of students, and to call out very specifically strategies and research related to the principles of UDL. The mathematics framework revision guidelines specifically state the following. The revised mathematics framework shall be explicit in its provision of guidance ensuring access and equity, including research related to UDL, The CFCC shall develop chapters on the instructional cycles for grade level mathematics. These chapters should support planning for instruction and assessment to ensure equitable access and opportunity for all students. They shall provide guidance for planning instruction that includes guidelines to support the integration of the principles of UDL in first instruction for all students, including multiple means of representation, which is giving learners various ways of acquiring information and knowledge, multiple means of expression, that is, providing learners alternatives for demonstrating what they know, and multiple means of engagement, that is, tapping into learners' interests, offering appropriate challenges, and increasing motivation. Additionally, the CFCC shall include ample concepts and strategies throughout the grade level chapters to support universal access and ensure access, equity, and inclusion for all students. The guidance will 5A, outline current research to support planning and implementation of the principles of UDL as they apply to mathematics learning. And 5B, provide examples to support professional learning in topics for universal access in mathematics and include content for administrator and teacher-led facilitation. With this in mind, joining us this morning is Dr. Rachel Lambert, Assistant Professor at the Giffords Graduate School of Education, University of California, Santa Barbara. Her scholarship focuses on students with disabilities in inclusive mathematics classrooms. She spent over 10 years as a teacher in both special and general education positions. Dr. Lambert will be co-presenting this morning together with our very own Mr. Richard Gifford, an education programs consultant in the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division, and who some of you know well by now by virtue of the fact that he is also a member of our facilitation team. Mr. Gifford specializes in developing and supporting dyslexia policy and programs and work on other literacy-related topics. Thank you, Dr. Lambert and Mr. Gifford, for presenting on this valuable topic this afternoon. Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Janine. Before we begin, I also want to take a moment to thank Rachel Lambert, who, as you said, will be presenting on UDL and math a little later. And I want to thank the California UDL Coalition. Members of the coalition developed and presented a longer version of my UDL overview in an earlier webinar for CDE. So with that, welcome to today's presentation. Here at CDE, we believe that universal design for learning is an important tool for supporting high quality instruction that meets the needs of each and every student. UDL principles are integrated into the English language arts, English language development framework, and information on UDL is present in the history social science framework and the current mathematics framework, as well as in draft versions of the health, education, and science frameworks. In the upcoming arts education and world language frameworks, guidance on universal design for learning is woven throughout the documents. The integration of universal design for learning throughout the curriculum frameworks demonstrates that planning and delivering instruction that aligns with UDL principles is essential for providing access for all students across the full range of content areas. Next slide, please. During our brief UDL presentation today, we're going to provide an overview of universal design for learning. We're going to discuss some foundational concepts of UDL. We're going to take a look at the UDL framework and the UDL guidelines. And as I said earlier, we'll hear from Rachel Lambert on how UDL applies to math instruction. Next slide. We'll begin our presentation by discussing the what and why of UDL. Next slide. Next slide. Let's start with a definition of universal design for learning. UDL is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. When introducing UDL, it's important to note that it is a framework, meaning that UDL is a flexible construct that can be applied to a specific context. UDL is not a prescriptive list of strategies that you just plug and play. Second, I want to emphasize that it is for all people. UDL incorporates decades of research on how humans learn, not students with disabilities. UDL isn't a special ed thing, it's an everybody thing. Next slide. UDL is designed to address what we call learner variability. And we know that this variability shows up in predictable aspects of the learning function. What we can predict, we can plan for. Using UDL to create flexible learning environments provides support for our students' learner variability. Next slide. The term universal design originated in architecture. So let's take a look at a classic example from architecture, the curb cut. People who put in curb cuts don't know who specifically is going to need them or why. They just know that there will be people on this path that will have trouble changing elevation sharply. So they provide a smoother transition. This is predictable user variability, and they design for it. They also know that curb cuts don't impede anyone who doesn't need them. A curb cut for learning that we are using right now, today, is the closed caption. We don't know which specific viewers are using closed caption, or if it's because you're hearing impaired, or you forgot your headphones and don't want to disturb others, or if it helps you with some of the language we are using. The captions are available, and if you don't need them, you don't have to read them. UDL is about having a clear goal and anticipating the likely barriers to that goal. Once anticipated, we can install supports for any and all learners who might need them. Next slide. We've looked at some of the basic ideas of UDL. Now I want to outline some core concepts and dispel a few potential misconceptions so that we all have a common understanding. Next slide. Let's discuss what UDL is and what it is not. Next slide. UDL is a lens. It is not a checklist, let alone a curriculum. It's a way of looking at learning environments and creating flexible paths to reach firm goals. When some people first see the guidelines, they think, am I supposed to be doing all these things all the time? The answer is no. The guidelines are tools to anticipate and address common points where variability manifests. Also, UDL is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It is key to understand this as we set expectations for ourselves and for others. No one should feel like they're going to anticipate and address every barrier overnight. It's about taking a first step and then another, a slow, steady progression. However, unlike a marathon, UDL does not have a finish line. After you begin implementing UDL, you will keep progressing and refining your practice. Finally, it's a standards-based, not standardized. UDL is in all of our state frameworks, is the only learning framework in ESSA. It's not everybody does what they want, but it's also not one size fits all. Next slide. Next slide. We have talked about what UDL is and is not. Now let's look at the UDL framework and the guidelines. But first, while we're on this slide, the visual journey map is an example of one strategy consistent with universal design for learning. Our agenda is presented by text and with visuals and with our narrative support so that we may know what to expect and where we are within today's webinar agenda. As we mentioned before, it's important to anticipate barriers to learning and ask, why are those problems occurring? For example, are there barriers to accessing and engaging our texts within our curriculum? Next slide. When we have anticipated and identified barriers within our learning environments, we can design options to address them. UDL provides multiple options for engagement, for representation, and for action and expression. These are the UDL guidelines. You can see them here. These guidelines are used to design learning experiences that meet the needs of all learners. The guidelines are a tool and a set of suggestions for applying the UDL framework to practice so that all learners can access and engage in meaningful and challenging learning opportunities. The goal of Universal Design for Learning is at the lower row of the guidelines. The ultimate goal of UDL is to develop expert learners who each in their own ways are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed. The underlying premise of UDL is not that we teach students what to learn, but we teach students how to learn. We want to get our students to the goal of being expert learners, and the guidelines help us get there. Vertically, the guidelines are organized according to the three principles of UDL: engagement, representation, and action and expression. They help us answer these foundational questions. How will students engage? How will students perceive? And how will students act on that understanding? Horizontally, the guidelines are organized into three rows. The access row includes the guidelines that suggest ways to increase access to the learning goal by recruiting interest and by offering options for perception and physical action. The build row includes the guidelines that suggest ways to develop effort and persistence, language and symbols, expression and communication. Finally, the internalized row includes the guidelines that suggest ways to empower learners through self-regulation, through comprehension, and executive function. Next slide. Yes, great. Now I'll hand the presentation over to Rachel.
Hello. So I'm Rachel Lambert. I'm a professor of both math education and special education. And I'm just here to talk about UDL and math specifically, so which is an intersection in my work. Why does UDL matter in math? I think that UDL is particularly necessary in the area of mathematics. Math class has long been a very narrow space where success is defined in a very narrow way. There's a certain kind of learner that does well in our math classrooms, and a bunch of students are put at the margins. And that is what I think we need to sort of push against. I think a lot of people are there too. UDL is important right now because it actually offers a framework to design from the margins. So it offers a way, instead of designing for this sort of like average mythical, they talk about the mythical learner, like fifth grade learner. So we design frameworks and things around this idea that students are standardized and similar at different grade levels when we really know they're actually very dissimilar. And so if we could design based on that, the variability, rather than based on the sort of false premise of similarity, we can design for the margins. And that means we can design for students with disabilities, Black, Indigenous, Latinx students, and emergent multilingual students. This kind of amazing diversity we have in California, we can design with those students' needs in the center instead of at the margins. So that's the why. Next slide. So I have been working, and this is still a draft, and I'm working on it actually with a lot of colleagues here in California, to create a more specifically mathematical version of UDL. Because one of the issues that I've had using it in mathematics is that it's too general and it seems sometimes generic because it's not exactly doing the work we needed to do for mathematics. So this is a draft. I love feedback. Ask me questions later. Send me an email. That's fine. And I'm not just connecting any mathematics to UDL, I'm specifically connecting ambitious mathematics teaching and learning. So at the center is what I see as the goal for UDL, strategic sense makers. The goal is not content crammed into the children's heads. The goal is that they can know how to learn mathematics and are strategic and can engage in like the standards of mathematical practice with as expertise. And they also identify as math learners. So we offer opportunities for them to develop identities as math learners. So I'm going to sort of take you around this overly complex graphic, and I apologize for that. In the green is the area of engagement. So that is for UDL is the why. Why do we learn? And I think two things are core when we're designing in this area. First, that students need to feel safe learning. They need to feel safe taking mathematical risks. Too many math classrooms don't feel safe for students, particularly those at the margins. And that needs to be addressed. And the second, that all kids should have access to a mathematics that's meaningful to them. That means culturally relevant, culturally sustaining, culturally responsive. It means authentic problem solving. It means the mathematics must be motivating to students and give them an opportunity to engage in real mathematics. So those two green things, why we learn, that's like the ground floor. We got to have that present for kids, especially kids at the margins, to engage in mathematics. The next level I want to talk about is the purple. This is the what, it's the content. This is so much of your work as designing frameworks, right? Because what are they going to learn? How are they going to learn, right? And I think two things are particularly important when we think about variability in math across what content and how we take content in. The first is that content needs to be multimodal. So that means that we need to present mathematics in ways that students can both learn through multiple modalities and that they can express their mathematical thinking in multiple modalities. And in mathematics, those two things are very interconnected. They're not very separable. So that they learn both through multiple modalities, but multiple mathematical representations. So that means that students have a chance to think in and through different mathematical representations and make connections between them. The second area I think is really important there is a focus on core ideas. For many students, a huge barrier in mathematics is that pace, is the rush. They don't have enough opportunities to really deal and engage and get sufficient experience with the core mathematical ideas. This is a major barrier for a lot of students, and it needs to be addressed in design. Curriculum has to be designed so it purposely, sequentially, and richly allows mathematical experience. So the last level is the blue is the sort of how, the level of strategic action. So how do we learn? And this, like Richard said, this is what UDL really offers, is this idea of the how is just as important as the what. And I think two areas here are really important. The first is strategic development, and that is not just strategic development mathematically. So you do want students to develop as mathematical thinkers and have more and more mathematical strategies. They also need to develop as strategic, learners of mathematics itself, so metacognition. So they need to understand, what do I do to become successful in math class? And that needs to be explicit, and they need to have development in their own understanding of themselves as math learners so they can grow in that area. And then the last area, which is a huge barrier for kids, is assessment. So assessment is a barrier because it's totally boring worksheets, or it's like math tests that are completely inaccessible to you. This is a major barrier for kids at the margins, right? And so we need to create ways in which assessment is useful. It's feedback that helps kids. We know how to do this, but it needs to be baked into the framework so that kids' assessment helps them grow instead of is a barrier to actually doing well in math class. So what does a UDL math class look like? It's a place where students feel safe, where they're engaged in problem solving, where the math is connected to their lives. Such a math class is carefully designed to focus on the most important content without rushing through complex ideas. It gives kids experience with mathematical representations in all their richness. The math is not just in textbooks, it's very visual, it's very real. And lastly, it's a place where students grow to know themselves better as math learners, to grow in the kind of self-knowledge that will allow them to be successful long-term in mathematics. That needs to be an explicit part of how we design our math classes. So this is what I'm proposing as what we need to center those needs of the students that have often been put at the margins so that our classrooms can work for all kids. Next slide. So that's sort of the end. This is just a quick introduction to what I'm thinking about here. And there's a couple slides here of resources. The first one addresses this idea of universal design in math and talks more about barriers and also brings in narratives of people at the margins so you can understand how mathematics feels. And then the rest of the ones that I've listed are all NCTM publications that are specifically about UDL and what I would consider ambitious mathematics teaching. And then we also have links to UDL in general. And I have some more publications that are coming out this year around UDL and mathematics, hopefully. And I really want to thank you guys for letting me speak to you today. It was an honor.
Thanks, Rachel. Can you go just scroll through those resources and all the way to slide 29. It's the general UDL resources. Again, thank you so much, Rachel, for your presentation. And Rachel referenced this link. This is a link to general UDL resources that were compiled by our partners at the California UDL Coalition. And the next slide, please. For questions and to get more information on UDL, you can contact me at the email address you see here, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for joining us today, and now I'll hand it back to, I'm not sure, either Shanine or Constantino.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lambert and Mr. Gifford. We appreciate your presentation on UDL. So exciting news, we're running pretty well. We have one segment left, which is our small group session. And so what we want to be able to do is to release you directly after your small group session. So I've skipped to day 2 preparation so that you have these notes before you go into your small groups, and then you can be released after your small groups. So looking ahead to tomorrow, which is a regular 9 to 5 schedule, you will open with a whole group consensus discussion of Chapter 6, which you'll be discussing in small groups today. Then you'll do the second read of Chapter 7, which is grades 6 through 8, and that will be small group and whole group discussions. And then in the afternoon, we will engage in small and whole group discussions of our second read of Chapter 8, which are the grades 9 through 12. So I'm going to turn it over to Constantino to give you directions for small group second read of Chapter 6.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Coates, and thank you to our presenters once again. Valuable information. Okay, so we have come to our final activity of the day, which is the small group for Chapter 6, Mathematics for Understanding, Transitional Kindergarten through Grade 5. Once again, we're asking you to delve deep into the weeds of the chapter and make your substantive recommendations, your deep and more significant changes, if you will, at this time. So please consider that as you are in your small groups. We have the consensus documents already loaded at the bit.ly that is on the screen. If you don't have this link, please send us an email to the Math Framework mailbox, and we will gladly provide you the link. Our groups are unchanged. And there are the links. If you don't have these links yet, please email the Math Framework mailbox and we can provide them to you so that you don't have to type them out. And we will leave this slide on in the main room. We will see you in the small groups in just a moment.